At the start of the movie, we see a jungle where there are many chimpanzees who are suddenly attacked by hunters. Some of the chimpanzees are captured and taken away from others in a cage. Next, we see one of the chimpanzees named Bright Eyes is solving a puzzle in a lab of a company called Ingenious. A scientist named Will and his colleague Robert are amazed to see her solve the puzzle in 20 moves. Will goes to meet his boss Steven and tells him that his new drug ALZ-112 is working. Will says one chimpanzee has shown great results and they should move to human experiments. Steven says they need board members' approval and tells Will to show him all research. Later, Will tells the board members that before the chimpanzee could not solve the puzzle. After taking his new drug, new brain cells were developed, and they can use this to cure Alzheimer's disease. Some staff member tries to bring Bright Eyes to Will's presentation, but she gets aggressive and attacks. They use a soda bottle to distract her and try to capture her, but Bright Eyes escapes from there. Bright Eyes run in the lab and destroys things and escapes in the main hall, and the staff try to stop her. She breaks in the meeting room where the guards shoot and kill her, and everyone is shocked. Steven orders Robert to close the project and kill all remaining chimpanzees since they all could be affected by the drug. Will tells Steven that 112 drug can save lives, but Steven says he is lucky to not get fired. Steven tells Will to restart work again on his new drug and come with better results. Will comes to know Bright Eyes gave birth a baby and was being protective about it and hence became aggressive. Robert tells Will to either take the baby with him or kill it, and Will decides to bring the baby home. At his home, we see Will's father Charles, who suffers from Alzheimer and does not remember much. Will shows him the baby chimpanzee, and Charles decides to name him Caesar based on his birthmark. Will starts taking care of Caesar, and we see Caesar is quite intelligent and even drinks the milk on his own. 3 years pass, and Caesar has now grown big and does many things on his own. He has learnt some sign language and solved many puzzles and spends his day in upper room looking outside the window. Will explains that because of his mother, Caesar also got effects of 112 drug and that developed his brain. When Charles's health worsens, Will decides to steal some 112 drug to give to his father. He steals the drugs and keeps some in the fridge and gives one dose to his father, and Caesar also sees this. In the morning, Charles looks much better and even plays the piano well, and Will is happy to see the results. Caesar goes outside to ride a bike, but is seen by kids and they get scared and shout. A neighbor named Hunziker tries to hit Caesar, but Will comes and stops him and rescue him. Caesar is injured and Will takes him to a doctor named Caroline, who applies some bandage on him. She is surprised to see Caesar use sign language, and Caesar tells Will to ask Carlo in for dinner. Will decides to take Caesar outdoors to a place named Redwoods so he can enjoy outdoors. After arriving, Caesar takes Will's permission and goes to explore the trees and even climbs a big tree. 5 years pass by and Caesar is now an adult, and Will and Caroline are a couple. Caesar feels alone and even asks Will whether he is a pet and about his origins. Will says he is not a pet and shows Caesar his birthplace, the Genesis Company, and tells him about his mother and the 112 drug. Caroline isn't happy to learn about this, but Will says his drug saved his father's life. We see that Charles's Alzheimer disease has returned as his immune system becomes resistant to 112 drug. One day, Charles goes outside and drives his neighbor Hunziker's car thinking as his own and damages it. Hunziker gets angry and starts arguing and pushing Charles, and Caesar sees this through his window. Caesar comes and attacks Hunziker while defending Charles and even bites his finger and badly hurts him. Animal Control Service is called where they take Caesar to an ape shelter, and Will comes to drop him off. Caesar does not like this new place and wants to go back home, but Will says he will soon come back for him. Will says his goodbye and leaves a sad Caesar at the shelter. Caesar is then tricked and locked in a cage with other chimpanzees by a worker named Dodge. Will finds his father's health is getting more worse and decides to meet Stephen. He tells Stephen that he gave his father the drug and it worked, and Stephen is shocked to hear this. Will says he needs to use the lab to make a new drug 113, and Stephen agrees since he sees more money in this. At the shelter, Caesar is not happy with the food and is punished badly by Dodge with water hose. At the lab, Will meets a new chimpanzee named Koba, who is well trained, and he decides to experiment on him. While giving the medicine to Koba, a pipe gets loose and Robert is infected by the gas. Caesar tries to be friends with other apes, but their leader tears his clothes and starts hitting him. Dodge shoots Caesar and other with tranquilizer and makes them calm down. Stephen sees Koba's intelligence has increased when he spells his name, and Stephen gets happy. Robert's health has gotten worsened as he sees some blood coming from his nose, and Will decides to take some 113 drug. Caesar becomes friends with Maurice, a former Serkis orangutan who also knows sign language. He sees the workers are taking some chimpanzees to Genesis for experiments, and he remembers the place. Will comes to meet Caesar and promises him he will soon take him home, but Caesar is angry on him. Caesar decides to escape from there and even steals a knife from one of the guards. He opens his gate at night and goes and frees the big gorilla named Buck and becomes his friend. He later frees the leader and tells him to obey his command and becomes their new leader. Will decides to use the new drug 113 on his father, who tells him not to, and Charles passes away in the morning. Later, Will comes to lab and finds Robert is sick and has not come from past 2 days. Will says to stop the experiments, but Stephen denies this and says this drug could make them loads of money. Will says the new drug has many risks, but Stephen does not agree, so Will quits his job. Robert comes to Will's home too, but does not find him and accidentally sneezes blood on his neighbor Hunziker. Will goes to the shelter and bribes them with money to let Caesar go free, and they agree. When Will goes to take Caesar back, he refuses to go and decides to stay back at the shelter. Will is heartbroken and sad and leaves from there. Caesar tells Maurice that apes alone are weak, but all the apes together can be strong. He sees the password of the key guard to the main door and uses it to escape at night. Caesar goes to Will's house and sees him sleeping and steals the 113 drug from his fridge. He goes back to the shelter and releases the drug on all the apes who are sleeping to enhances their intelligence. In the morning, they all wake up and Caesar sees their eyes' color have changed to green like him. One of the neighbors enters Robert's house and finds his dead in his bed. Dodge sees Caesar is still in the play area and goes to send him back in his cage. He hits Caesar many times and tells him to follow him back. Caesar speaks no, and Dodge is shocked to hear him talk, and Caesar hits him and takes him back to the cage. He frees all the apes from their cages, and they try to kill the other guard. Caesar stops them. Dodge tries to use the water hose on them, but gets electrocuted and dies. Caesar decides to go to Genesis, and they are escaped from the shelter and go towards the city. Will goes back to the shelter and finds the 113 drug bottle and the guard who tells him about Caesar's escape. Caesar and others go to Genesis and free Koba and the remaining apes from there. Stephen comes to the lab and finds the apes there and manages to escape from there in a helicopter. Caesar and others break into the zoo and frees the apes from there also. They attack anyone who captures apes and even attack police cars. Caesar and apes decide to use the bridge to go to Redwoods, but the police are already there. Stephen says to the police they need to kill Caesar to stop this attack, and they go the bridge, and Will also has arrived there. Caesar senses some danger ahead and tells some apes to go above and under the bridge. The police officers start attacking the apes and a fight begins between them. The apes reach the end of the bridge and uses a bus to block the gunfire. The police try to stop them but are suddenly attacked by apes from all directions. Stephen comes in his helicopter and starts shooting at them, but Buck comes in between and saves Caesar. Buck jumps on the helicopter and manages to crash it on the bridge, but gets shot multiple times. Caesar is sad to see his friend die and sees that Steven is still alive in the helicopter. Koba comes there and pushes the helicopter down and kills him and avenges his mistreatment. Will arrives there and sees Caesar and other apes escape from there and follows them in a police car. Caesar and the apes arrive at Redwoods, and Will follow them and finds Caesar there. Will apologizes to Caesar and begs him to come home with him, otherwise the humans will hunt them. Caesar hugs Will and talks to him and says he is home. Will is shocked and happy to hear him speak and accepts Caesar's wish to stay here with other apes. Caesar and other apes make Redwoods their new home and decide to live in the forest. Later we see Hunziker is a pilot and he arrives at the airport for his flight. We see he is now infected 113 drug and his nose is bleeding. He eventually spreads the virus around the planet, leading to a deadly pandemic and infecting all.